Hey, second graders. So I'm going to be talking to you today about your narrative clean copy writing. So on Friday, you are going to begin to write that clean copy using that story map from last week. So this story map was about you choosing a character and then deciding whether or not you were going to write about that character moving to a new place or that character moving to a new place who may have been a little different from the other neighbors within that new place. So you're going to be taking that story map and now you're going to be turning it into your clean copy writing, so your best writing. So I'm going to go through with you today what I would like to see in your clean copy writing. So your clean copy writing is going to be your best writing. So take your time and make sure that you have all of the steps that you need and that I'm asking for to make it your best writing and to make it a super awesome story to read. So your story map didn't have that detail that writing usually has. You just kind of wrote down the ideas that you had that you wanted to put into your writing. So now you're going to be adding more of those details into your story. So you're going to have details describing who's in your story, what happens in your story, when does your story take place, and where does your story take place. And you can do this by breaking it up into sections or what we call paragraphs in your story. So your first paragraph or your first section of your story is going to be the introduction. It's going to introduce the characters that are in your story, the setting or where your story takes place, and the problem that your character faces. So we already know that the problem that our characters are facing is that they're moving to a new place. So we are describing that. So we can describe it through how they're feeling or what they're doing. And then we're going to move into our second section or our second paragraph. And that is one or two events that happen within that story. And on your story map, you had those two events that happened before the ending of your story. So the two events could be the journey that happens as your character is moving, maybe an event that happens when they finally arrive to their new place. So, for example, in my story, my two events in the middle of my story talk about the journey of my character moving to the new place. And then my second event is my character at his new school, kind of what happens on that first day of the new school that he goes to. And then finally, we have our last section or our final paragraph. And that is the very last event in our story. And that's usually how the character solves the problem. So we know that our problem is the character moved to a new place. So they're probably feeling scared. And this last event can be something that gave the character that realization that moving wasn't so bad after all, or they're feeling a lot better about moving. And this gives the reader kind of a sense of closure. It makes them more relieved that the character found a solution to their story and that they found something that made them feel a lot better about being there. So, those are the sections that I would like to have in your story. And within those sections, I want you to make sure that you have awesome details. So, what I would like you to do is take that story map from last week, take those ideas and put them onto your paper, put them onto that clean copy template, and begin to write your story. So, make sure that you're adding details and you're using complete sentences with this. And I want you to write that whole story. I want you to do your best and write as much as you think that you should, including all those details to make it sound super, super awesome. Then, what I would like you to do when you finish your writing is to stop. I want you to go back and reread your story and make sure that you include all of the details that I will be asking. So make sure that your story, when you reread, make sure your story has that beginning that's introducing the characters, the setting, and the problem. Make sure your story has the middle. So it has one or two events that happen in the middle of your story that kind of give the reader an idea of what's going on with your character. Maybe when they're moving, maybe when they get to the new place. And finally, make sure that story has an ending with your conclusion. So make sure your story includes the resolution to the problem that your character faced in the beginning of the story. So, as always, make sure your story includes details. And remember that last week I talked about trying to use those adjectives in your story. So, I want to see at least two adjectives in your story. And remember, those are those descriptive words that describe things. So, for example, if I said, The green frog. Green is my adjective describing the frog. So when I'm reading, I picture a green frog. Or if I say the deep blue sea, my adjectives are deep and blue. So it gives the reader an idea of this deep, this beautiful blue sea. Instead of just using the word sea, it gives me a better picture in my head as I read it. Or the big brown bear. It gives me an idea that the bear is big and it's brown. So make sure that you have at least 2 of those adjectives in your story. Make sure that your story also includes transition words to tell the order of your events. So first, next, then, last, finally. Those words that are also found in your story map at the top of the pages, kind of in those buses, I believe is what they are. So make sure that you can use those. You can even use the ones from your story map. And as always, make sure that your end sentences, make sure there's punctuation at the end of them, and make sure that you are using capital letters correctly. So capitalize the beginning word in every sentence, and make sure that you're capitalizing your characters' names when you use them. That is very, very important. So once you go back and read your story and make sure, and in your head, you are thinking that your story has all of these things, that means that you think that you've written your best story. So when you know that you've written your best story using your best writing with lots of detail, then you're ready to submit. And then once you submit, I can't wait to read your stories. It's going to be super, super awesome to see what you all did. So I'm going to be going through with you my story that I wrote for you. So I'm going to show you this one more time. So this is the story map that I went through before. So I have my characters, I know my setting, and then I know the things that I would like to talk about within my story. But so I used all of these things and I added them into my clean copywriting, but just with a little more detail. So I'm going to go into, so this is my clean copywriting. My clean copy. And as you can see, because I wrote it on the computer, it's kind of weird how my sentences kind of go down like this. But you know that your sentences will write all the way across these lines and then carry into the next dotted lines. It just was a little weird with writing on the computer. But so I'm going to be reading my story to you, and I will be sending this to you to use it as a reference for when you're writing your story. So my beginning of my story goes like this. Marlin and his mother were sitting in their beautiful home in the deep blue sea. All of a sudden, the phone rang and his mother answered it. Marlin felt very curious when he saw his mother's face looking quite sad. His mother sat him down on the red sofa and told him of their new adventure. He was moving to the coral reef all the way across the sea. Marlin started feeling scared. So that is the beginning of my story. So I introduced my characters. I introduced the setting, that sea, the deep blue sea, and I introduced the problem that they're facing. So they have to move all the way across the sea to a coral reef. And within this, I hope that you saw some adjectives I used, like deep blue sea, the red sofa, those kinds of things. So now I'm going to be reading the middle or the second section or the second paragraph of my story. So with those 2 events that go on in my story. They started to pack all of their beautiful things. It took them 2 whole days to get to their new home. Marlin thought the coral reef was lovely. He saw all of the blues, greens, and reds of the different soft plants. However, he began to feel scared when he realized that there were no other dolphins like him in this place. Next, it was time for school. The yellow school bus was outside of his door. Marlin didn't want to go to school. He didn't have any friends. When he got to school, he felt like everyone was watching him. Everyone in this school was a seahorse except for one other dolphin. Marlin got excited when he saw the other dolphin. He swam up to him wanting to be his friend, but this dolphin was so mean. Marlin got red with anger. He wanted to move back home. He hated this place. So this was the middle of my story. So I have those 2 events that kind of go on within the story. So I chose to talk about the journey of Marlin and his mother moving, and then his first day of school in his new place. And I added details and I had some adjectives in there as well. So now I'm going to be reading my final section or that last paragraph of my story. He was sitting at the lunch table alone when a seahorse swam up to him. The seahorse introduced himself as Jimmy. He wanted to be Marlin's friend. They laughed and got to know each other as they ate their juicy green seaweed for lunch. Finally, Marlin realized that the coral reef wasn't so bad after all, especially when he had a friend like Jimmy. So that is the end of my story. So I talk about that last event that helped solve my character's problem. So my character was nervous about moving. He didn't have any friends, and people were kind of mean at the school. But he solved that problem when he made his new friend Jimmy. Having a friend like Jimmy made him realize that moving wasn't so bad after all. So that was the last part of my story. So I hope that this helped kind of giving you an idea of how I wrote it and how I would like you to write it. You guys have been doing super, super awesome with writing, and I cannot wait to read your stories. So I hope that this helps. As always, if you have any questions, please reach out, and I will be going over this with you during our morning meetings and kind of checking on you in our check-ins. So take your time, second graders, because you are starting this on Friday, but it is not due until Monday. So you have lots of time to make sure that it's your best writing. So good luck. I can't wait.